he said it was bonded at the atomic level.
Whoa.
Atoms are aligned.
Atoms are aligned.
Everything looks like it's fused together. Everything has a radius of curvature.
Absolutely smooth, like a 3D printing out of the space-time fabric itself.
Gave me this cheeky look, and because we were talking on Zoom, and I said, "Have you ever been given anomalous technology that defied prosaic explanation?" And he went, like he had the first time, "Yes."
Wow.
And then he told me this amazing story about how he was an expert in a particular type of welding called electron-beam welding.
Okay.
And apparently his company had done the nose wheel for the C-47, one of the big cargo planes used by the US military, and they need really tough welds. And this is one of the strongest welds you can do of metals. And he was like the world expert with his company in that type of welding. And it's an indistinguishable bead. Unlike, I don't know if you've ever welded, but welds leave a big bead. This type of welding didn't. And so he was contacted on his own admission by Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I think it was even whatever the technology division is known as now. I think it might be the Foreign Technology Exploitation, something or other.
FTE, yeah.
It was right after he made me head of the Foreign Technology Division.
So it was almost your first job for him.
Well, it wasn't my only job, unfortunately. I had a lot of other duties.
Well, if you were in charge of research and development, John, what kind of work was he doing in R&D?
Well, what he was doing in foreign technology, and one of the things they did was we would recover technology from a number of places. We call it foreign material exploitation. And a lot of it, of course, was Soviet. And you would get a piece of advanced technology, we would bring it in and give it to the laboratories and say, reverse engineer it. How does it work? What are the operating parameters?
Figure out what this is. And
right, so that's a lot of what they were doing. He's, of course, carrying it to another level.
And he was flown to Wright-Pat.
Yeah.
Do you know where these bodies were next headed?
I do know. When I came out, I asked the sergeants on the guard that night.
Right.
I asked, and they said, we talked to the drivers. It came from an air base in New Mexico. There was 5 trucks, and they were heading for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The boys, they had a driver and a co-driver, each truck, and the soldiers told the sergeants that, and they reported that back to me. It was on its way. And remember, in those days, about one of the only cross-country roads was Route 40. And they were coming through Route 40.
Right.
And they were heading for the Air Force Base in Ohio, Wright-Patterson.
And he did go underground. I remember I giggled and I said, "Did you go underground?" He went, "Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah." It was obviously a long way down. And he was taken into a room under heavy guard and shown what he described to me as the piece of a bulkhead. And he said it looked like it should have been incredibly heavy, but it was almost lightweight, like a feather.
Yeah.
He said, "Phil, this is bigger than Los Alamos. Space vehicles, light as a feather, can travel space, no radiation penetrate it, and nothing can harm them. Because it was paper thin, but the strength was terrific. You couldn't dent it, we couldn't scratch it or anything."
And he said, what blew him away was, and I don't know enough about metallurgy to know this, but he said there were 2 types of metal, and he wouldn't tell me what types of metal they were, that had been bonded. And he asked to look at it, I think, under an electron scanning microscope. And the scientist in him couldn't resist giving that sense of awe about what he saw, that he said it was bonded at the atomic level.
Whoa.
Whoever had built this had layered it atom by atom. And he said, I know for a fact that's not a technology, certainly, that I'm aware of, and I would have thought that I would have known.
Now, this is an interesting story, Art. I had a piece of string, looked like string.
String.
The atoms were aligned in it. It was so tough you couldn't burn it, and you couldn't even cut it.
Was it metallic, or was it light string or cord? Like thread?
Like cloth. It looked like it.
All right.
The nearest thing in this world that we found that was nearest that was a spider web. Terrific strength. You can stretch a spider web for miles. The spider spins it and aligns the atoms in it. And you can stretch it 5, 10 miles before it bends and won't break. And then it springs back into space. Now, we funded that with Wyoming University. We made flak jackets out of it. Only we couldn't make flak jackets because we couldn't get enough of it. We tried to get them to clone the spider, and I think to this day they haven't succeeded. Huh. But there's terrific strength in that, in the spider web. Marvelous thing. Atoms are aligned.
Atoms are aligned. Dr. Alexander, now with two pieces of material from this file cabinet that ultimately, I guess, came from Roswell, atoms are aligned. Can you explain that?
Not very easily, actually.
Yeah. So you're going into this craft, and what are you thinking when you're inside of it? Like, what are you seeing?
It's a very ominous feeling because there are no, first of all, everything is one color. It's like a dark pewter color, and there are no right angles anywhere. It's as if somebody took, I've said this before, somebody took a model and fashioned it out of wax and then heated it just for a short time so everything melted. Everything looks like it's fused together. Everything has a radius of curvature where two items meet. It's a really weird looking thing. But there was almost nothing other than a small foldable hatchway that looked recognizable. Everything was really unworldly, to pick a way to describe it.
And then Bob Lazar mentioned at one point that it seemed to him that the so-called sports model was as if grown out of the vacuum itself. Absolutely smooth, like a 3D printing out of the space-time fabric itself. The Super speaks to that directly.
Are you familiar with Ken Shoulder's work?
Of exactly vacuum objects, I've read certain papers as well.
It's very interesting, this idea of the vehicle being 3D printed out of the quantum vacuum.
As I understand, what he's talking about is that by instead of having a random selection of the atoms, that they were able to establish the polarity in such a way that the strength was greatly increased.
You're right, John.
Because we can't seem to quite understand exactly, because, when you talk about chemical vapor deposition, the manufacturing techniques associated with making very small nanostructured heterolattices. My graduate work, for instance, is in topological material physics, and so we do know more than is generally acknowledged about how to manufacture those lattices, but we don't have a lot of control over where exactly the atoms go. We just spit them out and physics takes over and it deposits them where it wants to deposit them in the lattice. So if you need them to be in extremely specific lattice points, and then you need to do layer after layer after layer to get these really novel behaviors, topological superconducting layers, topological insulative layers, Josephson junctions, and then one after the other. We don't know how to do that. So does that get 3D printed somehow?
Fascinating. Okay, well, we're getting deep quick.
Yeah, I think like semiconductors, you can do little amounts of atomic layer deposition, but you can't fabricate at scale materials that are atomically, where you're deliberately placing atoms. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I think for me, the big aha moment where I stopped being the skeptic and went, oh, fuck, this is real. I can't believe this. And I remember I actually spent days just going for walks because I was writing my book, and it had actually altered. I had a confirmational bias.
Yeah.
I was writing a book to debunk all this nonsense, and this guy is telling me it's true.
Is this in plain sight, by the way, that you were writing at the time?
Yeah.